Aisha Khan had learned to recognize the sound of absence. It was not silence exactly, but the hollow echo left behind when a house waited for someone who would not return that night. Samir's side of the bed stayed untouched more often than not, the pillow cool, the lamp on his side switched off as if the room itself had accepted his routine of being away. Samir Khan was not an unkind man. He worked long hours, traveled often, and spoke with the certainty of someone who believed sacrifice was the same as love. When he called, his voice was efficient, affectionate in theory but rushed in practice. Aisha listened, replied carefully, and ended each call with a practiced smile that faded the moment the screen went dark. Their marriage had not collapsed, it had simply thinned. Conversations were shorter, pauses were longer. Aisha stopped sharing small details, what she cooked, what she felt, what she feared, because they no longer seemed necessary. Samir always promised, "We'll talk properly when I'm back," and she always nodded, knowing that when he did return, something else would demand his attention. On one such afternoon, when the sun leaned heavily against the curtains and the house felt larger than usual, the doorbell rang. Aisha hesitated before answering. Visitors were rare when Samir was away. Rizwan Ahmed stood outside, holding a polite smile and a small bag of documents. He was Samir's friend, old, trusted, frequently mentioned in stories about work and travel. Rizwan had been to the house before, always with Samir, always briefly. "Samir asked me to drop these off," Rizwan said, extending the bag. His voice was calm, familiar in a distant way. Aisha thanked him and invited him in without thinking much of it. Hospitality came easily to her, caution did not. They sat across from each other in the living room, separated by a table that felt more symbolic than necessary. Rizwan spoke about work, about delays, about Samir's exhaustion. Aisha listened, grateful for news that did not arrive through a phone screen. When Rizwan left, the house seemed quieter than before. Aisha noticed the feeling and dismissed it immediately. Loneliness, she told herself, had a habit of exaggerating ordinary moments. But Rizwan came again the following week. Then again after that. Sometimes he brought messages from Samir, sometimes files, sometimes nothing at all except conversation. Each visit was brief, respectful, and easy. Too easy. Rizwan noticed things Samir no longer did. He commented on the books she read, asked about her parents, remembered details from previous conversations. When Aisha spoke, he listened without checking his phone, without interrupting. It felt unfamiliar, and that unfamiliarity unsettled her. Still, she told herself there was nothing wrong. Samir trusted Rizwan. She trusted Samir. Trust, she believed, was enough to keep things in place. One evening, as rain traced thin lines down the windows, Aisha realized she had been waiting for the doorbell to ring. The thought startled her. She stood up from the sofa and moved to the kitchen, annoyed with herself for assigning meaning to a coincidence. When the bell finally rang, her heart reacted before her mind did. Rizwan looked slightly surprised to see her answer so quickly. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said. "No," Aisha replied too quickly, then corrected herself. "I mean, Samir didn't mention you were coming." "He didn't," Rizwan said after a pause. "I was nearby." They stood in the doorway longer than necessary, the rain filling the silence. Aisha stepped aside and let him in. Inside, the house felt different. Not changed, just aware. Their conversation drifted from safe topics to quieter ones. Rizwan mentioned how often Samir worked, how pressure changed people. Aisha responded carefully, choosing words that revealed little yet hinted at more than she intended. When Rizwan finally left, Aisha locked the door and leaned against it, unsettled by a feeling she could not yet name. Nothing inappropriate had happened, no line had been crossed. And yet, something had shifted, subtle but undeniable. Later that night, Samir called. He spoke about meetings, delays, plans. Aisha answered as she always did, but her thoughts lingered elsewhere, on unasked questions, on unexpected comfort, on the dangerous ease of being understood. As she ended the call and turned off the lights, Aisha realized that the house no longer felt empty in the same way. And that realization, more than anything else, kept her awake. Aisha Khan did not mark the change with a date, but but she felt it all the same. It announced itself quietly, in the way she began arranging the living room before Rizwan Ahmed arrived, or how she checked the time more often on days when Samir was away. These were small habits, easily explained, yet they carried a weight she pretended not to notice. Rizwan's visits became less predictable and more frequent. Sometimes he came with a reason, documents, updates, a message from Samir, and sometimes he did not bother to disguise his presence with purpose. He never overstayed, never crossed the lines Aisha knew how to defend, yet each visit left her thinking longer than it should have. Samir, on the other hand, remained a voice on the phone. When he was home, he seemed restless, distracted, already half absent. He spoke about work with urgency, about the future with certainty, but rarely asked how Aisha filled her days. When she tried to tell him, he listened politely, as if hearing something familiar rather than something important. Rizwan noticed this. He never said it directly, but his questions lingered where Samir's did not. "Doesn't it get tiring, being alone so much?" he asked once, not looking at her when he spoke. Aisha hesitated before answering, surprised by the accuracy of the question. "I manage," she said finally. Rizwan nodded, as if that response confirmed something he already knew. Aisha began to guard her words around Samir. She no longer mentioned Rizwan's visits unless asked, and even then, she reduced them to harmless facts. The omission troubled her more than the act itself. She told herself she was avoiding unnecessary explanations, not hiding anything of consequence. One afternoon, Mrs. Farah, the neighbor, mentioned casually that she had seen Rizwan leaving the house again. Her tone was neutral, curious rather than accusing, but Aisha felt heat rise to her face. She laughed it off, offering a simple explanation, and the conversation moved on. Yet the comment stayed with her, echoing louder than it deserved. That evening, Rizwan arrived while the sky darkened early. The electricity flickered, leaving the house briefly dim. They sat closer than usual, drawn together by circumstance rather than intention. Their conversation drifted toward silence, the kind that felt heavy with unspoken thoughts. "I hope I'm not making things complicated," Rizwan said suddenly. Aisha looked at him, startled. "You're not," she replied, too quickly again. Rizwan studied her expression, then looked away. "Samir trusts me," he said, not as a reminder, but as a fact that carried responsibility. "So do I," Aisha answered, and meant it in more ways than one. The words settled between them, neither comforting nor dangerous, but balanced unsteadily on the edge of both. Rizwan stood soon after, sensing the moment had gone far enough. When he left, Aisha felt a strange mixture of relief and disappointment. That night, Samir called later than usual. His voice sounded tired, impatient with the delay. Aisha told him about her day, careful to edit, careful to pause at the right places. Samir responded with reassurances that felt rehearsed, then ended the call abruptly when another obligation demanded him. Aisha sat in the dark long after, replaying conversations she had not realized she was memorizing. She recognized the shift now, not dramatic, not obvious, but real. Her emotional center had begun to lean away from where it belonged, drawn by attention that felt sincere and presence that felt steady. The realization frightened her. It also explained too much to ignore. The next time Rizwan came, Aisha met him at the door with a new awareness. She maintained distance, kept the conversation brief, but the effort itself revealed how much had changed. Rizwan sensed it immediately. "I should go," he said earlier than usual, "before this becomes something it shouldn't." Aisha nodded, grateful for his restraint and unsettled by her own reaction to it. As the door closed behind him, she understood that the danger was no longer hypothetical. It lived not in actions taken, but in feelings acknowledged too late. And once seen clearly, it could no longer be unseen. Samir Khan returned without warning, his suitcase by the door before Aisha Khan had time to rehearse surprise. He looked thinner, sharpened by travel and urgency, as if the world beyond the house had carved away pieces she had not noticed missing. He kissed her forehead, familiar and distant in the same gesture, then asked for tea as if nothing had changed. Everything had changed. Aisha moved through the kitchen with deliberate calm, aware of how carefully she placed each cup, how evenly she breathed. Samir spoke about schedules and setbacks, about how exhausting it was to keep everything moving. She listened, nodding in the right places, her thoughts fixed on the spaces between his sentences. He did not ask how she had been. She did not offer. Over the next 2 days, Samir remained physically present but emotionally elsewhere. He answered calls mid-conversation, checked messages at the table, slept heavily. Aisha watched him with a new attentiveness, noticing how easy it had become to observe rather than engage. The realization stung more than she expected. Rizwan Ahmed did not come by. That absence felt louder than his visits ever had. On the third evening, Samir finally looked at her properly. "You seem quiet," he said, not unkindly. "Is everything all right?" The question lingered, suspended between them. Aisha considered her answer carefully. Honesty pressed against her chest, urgent and frightening. Silence felt safer, but heavier. "I've just been thinking," she replied. Samir studied her face, searching for something she could not define. "About what?" "About us," Aisha said. The word seemed to slow him down. He sat back, frowning slightly. "We're fine," he said after a moment, as if stating a fact that required no examination. Aisha nodded, and the gesture felt like a small surrender. Later that night, she lay awake while Samir slept beside her, the familiar rhythm of his breathing no longer soothing. She thought about how trust eroded, not with impact, but with repetition. With every unasked question, with every comfort found elsewhere. The following afternoon, Rizwan called. His voice was careful, restrained. "I heard Samir's back," he said. "Yes," Aisha answered. The simplicity of the word felt final. "I wanted to check in," Rizwan continued. "To make sure everything is okay." Aisha closed her eyes. "It will be," she said, choosing the future over the present. Rizwan paused, then spoke with quiet resolve. "Then this is where I step away." She understood what he meant. No explanations followed, none were needed. The call ended, leaving behind a clarity that hurt but steadied her. That evening, Samir mentioned Rizwan casually, unaware of the significance. Aisha listened, surprised by how little resentment she felt. What remained was responsibility, heavy, unavoidable. "Samir," she said suddenly. He looked up, alert now. "Yes, there are things we don't talk about," Aisha said. Her voice did not shake, though she expected it to. "And when we don't, they don't disappear. They just find other places to exist." Samir was silent for a long moment. "Are you saying I've been neglecting you?" he asked, defensiveness edging his tone. "I'm saying I've been lonely," Aisha replied. "And I don't want to be anymore." The truth settled between them, incomplete but real. Samir looked away, troubled, processing something he had not prepared for. He did not apologize. He did not argue. He simply nodded, slowly, as if acknowledging a debt he had not known he owed. That night, the house felt different again, not lighter, not resolved, but honest in its discomfort. Aisha understood that nothing was fixed, only revealed. Trust, once strained, did not return on command. It required work, attention, and the courage to face what had nearly gone unnamed. As she turned off the light, Aisha knew this was not an ending. It was a pause, a moment before choices fully took shape, before consequences settled. And in that fragile space, the future waited, uncertain and watching.